welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex and this is the Lily Library. So it's been a minute. Sorry about my absence. I missed you guys. I miss talking about books, even to my small audience. Life has just been really chaotic. It's been a tough year, but I have been reading. And I wanted to use this video as a wrap up of what I've read since the last video I filmed up to the summer. And then I was planning on doing some summer reading wrap ups in a separate video. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the books. I really do have something for everyone. Every reader is represented. I've got nonfiction, I've got biography, I've got fiction, I've got comics, I've got sci-fi, I've got everything. So I'm going to start with the books that I read most recently, mainly because my favorite book I read most recently. So I want to start by reviewing that. And that is a book of poetry, and it is called Gay Poems for Red States by Willie Edward Taylor Carver Jr. At the beginning of Willie Carver's career, an administrator warned him about discussing his otherwise openly gay identity at work. No one will protect you, including me. The new administration allowed for more freedom, but the initial warning eventually rang true. School officials failed repeatedly to address harassment of students and of Carver himself until he could no longer endure such a purposeful deterioration of human rights. While Carver's testimony before the House of Representatives brought much needed attention to the protections of LGBTQ+ people in schools, the damage was done. Months after being named the 2022 Kentucky Teacher of the Year, he announced his decision to leave the public school system. In Gay Poems for Red States, Carver counters the injustice of a persistent anti-LGBTQ+ movement by asserting that a life full of beauty and pride is possible for everyone. More than a collection of poetry, Carver's earnest and heartfelt verses are for those wishing to discover and understand the vastness of Appalachia, and for the LGBTQ+ Appalachians who long for a future, for a home, and an often unwelcoming place. I'm getting emotional just reading the synopsis, so you can only imagine what it was like reading the poetry. These poems are about Carver's childhood, and I just can't express how important this is to young people, young LGBTQ+ people in Kentucky and in any conservative state who feel like they have no one, they don't have a voice, they don't have an outlet, they don't have anyone to connect to understand them. And I think that they will find solace in Carver's voice. When he writes, it really does feel like a hand reaching out in support. And that is one of the most beautiful things that literature of any kind can bring. I'll go through some of I have so many favorite poems in here. Self-Hating Preacher, Neck Bones, Creek, a guy named Casey who I had never met. I sobbed hysterically, and I'm not exaggerating reading this. It's such a simple and short poem, but it speaks to the necessity of connection and the loneliness that comes with small town living, especially when you're different or you feel different. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. But there is one poem that I just wanted to read a small snippet of, and that is called Waiting for God. So this one specifically is about before he was baptized. Do you think God will wait until Sunday before the end of the world? What if he came tonight and I went to hell? She brought the cover around my shoulders, and her frayed and overworked arms anointed the bargain bin blanket with the power to embrace me. She gestured upwards. The same God that put them stars in the sky didn't do it so he could send you to hell. He holds them up for a reason. He'll wait for you. The dark sky became an aquarium of sparks and love, and every fish had a name. Those 3 days stretched into 3 decades. Despite the baptism, preachers, and lawmakers, the winners and losers, the lovers and the haters, and the neighbors with tongues and arms hot like red irons would, over and over again, hold my head underwater, hoping the metal hiss of steam would mock me as I drowned. But with each plunge under, the darkness of water would part, and the fish made of stardust would lay hands on me and dance in the spirit. Oh, I'm gonna cry right now. Okay, woohoo, hold myself together. This was just beautiful. It was absolutely stunning. I just feel so honored that I got to read it. The next thing that I read is Something is Killing the Children, which is a comic series, and it's published by Boom. This is by James Tynan, Werther Dell'Edera, and Mikel Morito. I believe that James is the author, Werther is the illustrator, and Mikel is the colorist. This is a series about a monster hunter named Erica Slaughter, who at the beginning of the series goes to a small town that has experienced a great tragedy in which many children have died, and she is investigating to get to the bottom of it and to fight whatever entity killed the children. I don't want to spoil anything. I believe that I have read all of the currently published volumes. There are 7 total volumes. That's about 35 issues of the comic. I usually wait for the published volumes to come out, but I'm kind of want to read them online because I want to see where the story goes. This is an incredibly graphic horror thriller series. It's not necessarily scary, but there is an extreme amount of gore. So I do want to give a little bit of a trigger warning to anyone going into this. There's a lot of horrific things happening in the world right now, and we're seeing a lot of things online, a lot of violent images, especially images involving children. I know these can be traumatizing. If those are haunting you like they're haunting me, this might be a bit of a challenging series to get through because, like I said, it does not hold back. Overall, I did enjoy it. I really appreciated the main character. She was a badass. And I do like the way that trauma is kind of explored in this series. I think it's explored on a surface level, but I think it's okay because it is a comic. Really fun. It was, I don't know if I'd say fun. It was violent, okay? It was violent. Next up, I read Sleeping Giants by Sylvia Newvale. So this is a sci-fi book with a fascinating premise. The book opens and we're following a young girl who is out on a bike ride, and she sees a light and follows it into the forest and then falls into a perfectly symmetrical hole dug in the ground with hieroglyphic-esque markings on the walls that glow, and she's being held by a giant metal hand. Great start to the book, great idea. It could really go anywhere. And unfortunately, I do feel like it went to the most simple place it could possibly go. So this is supposed to read like a nonfiction account told through a series of interviews, much in the vein of like a World War Z. I personally did not become invested in any of the characters' stories. And when you don't really care about the characters, you don't really care about what's happening. I mean, inevitably. I have to say, this is a trilogy, I believe, and it leaves on, I would say, somewhat of a cliffhanger, and I had absolutely no desire to look up what happened next, and that is kind of the biggest red flag. I think I had really high expectations too, so that didn't help me in the enjoyment of this, and yeah, it just ended up being pretty mediocre, and yeah, I'm gonna donate it because I think someone will love it, just not me. I went to Pittsburgh for a fun little trip with my family, and I'm gonna do a video with some of the books that I got there because we did end up going to a really cute bookstore. And we also went to the Carnegie Museum Center, and they had an exhibition there that was fascinating, and they had a lot of book recommendations that accompany that exhibit. So I do have that book haul coming up for you. In anticipation of the trip, I did read some Pittsburgh centered books. So I reread The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I mentioned this book in my first video on this channel as my favorite book to screen adaptation, primarily because Stephen Chbosky, the author, he directed it and wrote it, which I think makes a big difference. But this book takes place in Pittsburgh, and there are so many iconic moments of it that are Pittsburgh centered, including going through the Fort Pitt Tunnel. And yes, I was listening to Landslide by Fleetwood Mac while we were going through the tunnel, obviously. I love this book. This is so relatable to me. This is so grounded in my reality. Like, I had so many moments that were similar when I was growing up, when I was a teenager. It was a wonderful reread. And then, because we were in Pittsburgh, I decided to finally read The Good Neighbor, The Life and Work of Fred Rogers by Maxwell King. And then I also read The Mr. Rogers Effect by Dr. Anita Knight Coonley. These two books are obviously about Mr. Rogers, and I love Mr. Rogers. I think he's the closest thing we have to a modern day saint, apart from Dolly Parton. I'm really trying not to idolize people, but those two I will till the day I die. I got to go to the Heinz Museum, and they have an exhibit of Mr. Rogers. And they have like King Friday's castle. They have wardrobe pieces that Joanne Rogers donated. They have his iconic sweater. They have like the foyer entrance into the living room where he sings Won't You Be My Neighbor. It's just really cool, and totally geeked out, but I enjoyed both of these. This one is really about the values of Mr. Rogers, what he represented, how you can apply that in your own life. She kind of deduces it down to like 7 core principles, and those are listening first, validating feelings, pausing and thinking, showing gratitude, developing empathy, practicing acceptance, and establishing security, which I think is very accurate. This wasn't groundbreaking to me because these are things that I practice every day, but I think this is a good look into the psychology of his teachings. And then Won't You Be My Neighbor is more of a straight biography of Fred Rogers and his life. There was a lot about his television career in this. This is obviously one of the biggest parts of his life, but I kind of found it the least interesting. I wanted to know more about him. But that's the thing about Mr. Rogers. He led such an unproblematic life that there really wasn't any juicy or salacious tidbits in it. There were a lot of parts I adored. Speaking about his relationship with his family, his desire to live like a very ethical, very simple life. I also loved the quiet and reserved yet powerful way that Mr. Rogers kind of lived out his faith. Highly recommend this. Recommend both of these, actually. I love him. I love Mr. Rogers. All right, here we go. A Cord of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I have my little banned bookmark in here, which says books are for reading, not burning. I must point out before we begin this, I read this trilogy originally in 2016 and 2017, I believe. And I can be critical of many things in this series, but I do appreciate it for what it is. The second book is really fantastic in my opinion. She is an expert storyteller when she gets it right. With that being said, A Cord of Silver Flames, not my favorite. The things I did like, Nessa's storyline is one that I've been invested in since her introduction. I think characters that feel slighted or jaded or hurt and are very reactionary and cruel and mean are fascinating. It's why I find villains fascinating. You know, it's like, how did we get here? What is the root cause? Like, how do we overcome this? These are real human things. I really did appreciate her story. However, Sarah J. Maas, she has this thing. She will kind of shape and form and mold this character in a certain way. And you understand that character, then she'll decide to alter the character. And not in kind of a natural progression where you see like a story arc or a certain change in their personality due to something they experience. You just see them change. She's done it twice in this series and she's done it once in another series, but that was the Throne of Glass series. I gave up that series after I believe the 4th book. I have my reasons, we might get into it. I don't want to spoil anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a time right here where I'm pointing, and you can just go to that time if you haven't read this series and you don't want to be spoiled on it. Go now. Rhysand. What are we doing? The way that she characterized Rhysand in this novel. Now, some people say it's because it's through Nesta's perspective. So we're seeing everything through her lens and how she feels, but no. There were so many problems I had with the way he acted, the way he spoke, the decisions he made. He was so focused on their equality in the original trilogy, that they were a true partnership, that they were completely open with each other and completely honest. And that's one of the things that I enjoyed about it, is like the way that their relationship kind of formed into that. In this one, he's aggressive, like way too aggressive, demanding, he's insecure, he's got attitude. Also, the keeping the dangers of the pregnancy away from Farah and not letting her know. I mean, what the fuck was that? It totally changed how I thought about Rhysand, and I honestly have not been able to recover from it. I have no words. All I can hope for is that we get an Asriel book, because he really is my last hope, and he's my favorite character. If he changes, I really don't know if I can continue reading Maas. I really don't know if I can. I don't know. I also read The 100 Years' War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance, 1917 to 2017, by Rashid Kahaldi. Kahaldi and his family are indigenous to the land that is now Palestine, And I think having his perspective on events past and present is the most relevant. The way he speaks of the history of Palestine is very important. You see it through not only the eyes of Khaldi and his family, but the Palestinian people as a whole. How over years and years and years of conflict, they built a resistance. When you see it in that perspective, I think it humanizes the people of Palestine a lot more. Benjamin Netanyahu recently spoke to Congress. He just referred to the Palestinian people as a whole. He said Hamas, but Hamas has kind of become an overarching term for the people of Palestine, as barbaric. And when we think of people in this very narrow lens as these one-dimensional beings, we lose our humanity in a way. What we're seeing now is truly horrific. I think that our job as Westerners is just to continue to advocate for victims in what I consider to be a genocide, and to really push your local representatives, whether they are conservative, whether they are liberal, for a permanent ceasefire. Yeah, that's that. And I hate to shift the tone so dramatically in this next series of books, but we're going to. One of my favorite television shows is Vanderpump Rules, which is a reality show that is on Bravo. It's about a group of servers in Los Angeles who work at a restaurant that is owned by Lisa Vanderpump, who is of housewife fame, but is also an entrepreneur and restaurateur. And it's just drama and chaos and young people working in the service industry who become older people who have messy lives still. I have followed these stories for 10 years. To say I'm invested is an understatement. So as a birthday treat to myself, I decided to pick up the autobiographies, the how-to books of the Vanderpump Rules cast. Now, were these good? Not really. As a Vanderpump Rules expert, I did love the juicy insight we got to behind the scenes of the filming of the series. I read Stassi's books first, which were Next Level Basic and Off With My Head. These were so bad. I tabbed it in not an ironic way, but thinking that maybe I would want to do like a deep dive into why I thought these were so horrendous, but I don't really think I have the audience for that, and I just don't think people care about that. But I will say, I don't think she was really in a situation to be offering life advice, and also some of it isn't life advice, it's just random like tidbits, like her favorite, what are the best kinds of ranch. I don't know. There is this just alarming thing that happens in this first book where she talks about going to Europe, and on a trip to Europe, she wears a jacket, a trench coat that has her initials embroidered on it. Her name is Stassi Schroeder, so the initials were SS. That's bad enough, right? Just knowing that, seeing that, living it, doing it. But she goes further, and she actually posts on Instagram with the caption Nazi chic. I just watched the show. I don't follow these people on Instagram. I don't know what they're posting, but that literally blew my socks off. So the last chapter is all about like this incident and how she got canceled, and it's about accountability, which is so ironic because the next book is all about her coming back from being canceled another time. This is very convoluted, but I'll try to explain this very simply. There was a girl on the show who is African American, and she was also in a cheating scandal with one of the main cast members. So Stassi and Kristen, who we'll get to, decided it would be a good idea to call the police and tell them that she looked like someone who had committed a robbery, who was also just Black and really didn't look like her, to get her in trouble. This all came out in 2020. She got fired from the show. It's so messy, but honestly, the audacity, fascinating. They were awful. I mean, they were just awful. It was honestly hard for me to get through them. Then I read Kristen Doty's He's Making You Crazy, How to Get the Guy, Get Even and Get Over It. I cannot stress this enough. that the idea of this person writing a book about relationship advice is truly mind-boggling, which is why I had to read it. I'll just say this, I'll be nice. I would say that she has a very tumultuous dating life, and I really don't think she should probably be giving anybody advice on dating. The book was like Stassi's, where it was like semi-autobiographical, like she's telling stories about her life, but she's also putting in like her tips. I remember one of it is like how to get even with a guy who cheats, and she got into the girl who he cheated with into her email, and she signed her up for like 1 million spam emails, and I think sent her boyfriend, the guy who was cheating on her with, like an email to him. Not healthy, not productive, kind of concerning, and very Kristen Doty. Love her to death, but this was a lot. And then I read Lala Kent's Give Them Lala. She didn't even become a New York Times bestseller. And as you can see, she put national bestseller on here. If you don't watch Vanderpump Rules, it was a big plot line when her book was being released, and she got a cake to congratulate her on becoming a New York Times bestseller before her book was published, and then she didn't become a New York Times bestseller. It's so good. I actually like this one the most out of all of them because it actually spoke about her life, her upbringing, how she got into the show, her meeting her now ex fiance, who was like a creepy casting couch guy, by the way. This was published when they were still together. She has since left him. So I need an update. I need a new book, Lala. So get on it. And then finally, Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. The story follows Gilda, and she is a young woman who is struggling with some crippling anxiety around death after a near-death experience, and she decides to seek help at a free therapy session at a local Catholic church. But when she gets there, a character named Father Jeff assumes that she is there for a job interview for a secretarial position, and she ends up taking it, even though she's an atheist. I don't remember a lot of this book. I did read it at the beginning of spring, and I didn't love it. I think that my expectations were different for it. I really thought this was going to be a buddy comedy of sorts with Father Jeff and Gilda and just their different life experiences colliding. But really this story was about Gilda and her alone. I think a lot of young women will connect to her character and will understand her struggle. I did to an extent. I don't know, the story just didn't hit the way I thought it was gonna hit, and I just don't think it gave me enough. And while I was reading it, I couldn't help but think about another book that I read that I believe is near perfect, and that also affected the experience. And that book is Smoke Gets in Your Eye and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. This book I probably read about 3 or 4 years ago. This is also about a girl who has an extreme death anxiety that manifests as OCD for her. And the only way that she can think to overcome it is to really immerse herself in it. And so she starts to work at a crematory. And it's kind of like misadventures of her starting, but then it becomes her really embracing and understanding her purpose in life. It does talk about being a mortician and what comes with that, and kind of the harrowing and funny and sad moments, but it really is also an exploration of her as a person. It was just so inspiring. So there they are, the books that I read this spring. Like I said, stay tuned for some book haul videos, and also I'll be doing my summer reading wrap up soon. And I'm so happy to be back. Thank you if you've watched this long. Give me a like, give me a comment, tell me what you've been reading. I need all your recommendations. And yeah, you guys have a great day. Bye.